In the harshest corners of the battlefield, where every shot could mean life or death, one soldier is overlooked by all, mocked, underestimated, and haunted by a past failure. But when the mission turns deadly, she's given a chance to prove herself. What happens next will shatter everything the military thought they knew about her. A single shot, a moment that will change everything. The harsh alarm echoed through the cold, steel walls of Tactical Outpost 87. Eliza Shaw stirred from her sleep, her eyes still heavy with exhaustion. For 18 months, the shrill sound had been her wake-up call, a constant reminder of her duty in this desolate, unforgiving place. As the sun began to rise over the frozen landscape of the Cadron Plateau, she threw on her regulation boots with practiced ease, her calloused hands moving without hesitation. The outpost, small, weather-beaten, and surrounded by jagged mountains, seemed to match the bleakness of the world around her. At 25, Eliza had learned to be invisible. Drawing attention was a risk she couldn't afford. The soldiers at the base had made their judgments about her, and she'd learned to live with them. Her small frame, her gender, and her failed sniper school record had made her the target of mockery. Still, Eliza pushed through. She wasn't here for praise or recognition. She was here to do her job. Her hands were a map of her responsibilities. Cuts from ammunition belts, burns from chemicals, calluses from cleaning the very weapons that the real soldiers used. She didn't mind. It was a job. It was her duty. Shaw, the gruff voice of Staff Sergeant Martinez, sliced through the morning air. His massive frame blocked the doorway as he stared down at her, his face twisted in disdain. "Those M4 South better be spotless when I inspect them at 0800, he snapped. "And I mean spotless, not your usual half-hearted woman's work." Eliza didn't respond. There was no point. She'd learned the hard way that any reaction, even a word, would only make things worse. Instead, she nodded once, then returned to the workbench where 17 assault rifles waited. She had her routine. She knew it better than anyone. Each rifle would be disassembled, cleaned, and reassembled with meticulous precision. The kind of precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep. And no matter what they said about her, Eliza knew one thing. These weapons needed to function flawlessly. Lives depended on them. As she worked, Martinez's voice continued to echo in her mind. His words were nothing new. Every day it was the same insults, the same mockery. "You think you belong here with real soldiers," he had said. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Eliza had once been trained by the best. She had trained under Master Sergeant Carter, the man who held the record for the longest confirmed kill in military history. She had been his final pupil. For 2 years, she had learned techniques that most snipers couldn't even pronounce, let alone execute. But none of that mattered now. They didn't know her skills. They didn't know what she could do. Her hands moved methodically over the rifles, her mind focused on the task at hand. She didn't need to prove herself to them. Not anymore. But in the back of her mind, she knew the truth. One day, she would have to. By the time the last rifle gleamed, the sun had fully risen over the desolate plateau. Eliza's back ached, but she didn't mind. She had done her job. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. No one else could be trusted to do it with the same care. No one else had the same commitment to perfection. As she packed up her tools, a familiar voice broke her concentration. "Shaw, you've got a visitor," came the call from Corporal Webb, his tone far more respectful than Martinez's. "Visitor? At this time?" Eliza asked, raising an eyebrow. Webb shrugged, his usual easy smile now replaced by a hint of curiosity. "I don't know, but command wants to see you." Eliza's stomach churned. Being summoned to the command bunker wasn't a good sign. It either meant extra duty or some sort of disciplinary action. She hadn't done anything wrong. Not lately, at least. Walking toward the bunker, Eliza's mind raced. What do they want? Maybe they had finally noticed how perfectly maintained the weapons were. Or maybe they just needed someone to clean the equipment after another mission. But as she entered the command bunker, the usual bustle of activity seemed different today. Captain Rodriguez, who rarely acknowledged her presence unless absolutely necessary, looked up from the tactical map spread out in front of him. "Shaw," he said, his voice steady but weary. We've got a situation. I need you on observation post 9, starting tomorrow." Eliza blinked in surprise. Observation post 9 was the best post on the entire base. It had the clearest line of sight across the valley, nearly 2,000 yards on a good day. It was a prestigious assignment, and to be chosen for it meant someone had noticed her. "I thought I'd be cleaning rifles," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Not observing." Rodriguez gave her a long, hard look. "You've got an eye for detail, Shaw. We need someone who won't miss anything important." Eliza nodded, trying to suppress the flicker of hope that rose inside her. "Understood, sir." Walking back to the supply bunker, Eliza's thoughts swirled. For the first time in months, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was more than just the soldier who cleaned weapons. Maybe she had a chance to prove herself again. The air was thick with the bitter chill of early morning as Eliza Shaw made her way to observation post 9. The path was treacherous, the ground hard and slippery beneath her boots. It had been days since the last snowstorm, but the remnants of it still lingered, adding an extra layer of danger to the journey. The wind howled through the narrow gaps in a mountain pass, but Eliza barely noticed. She had grown accustomed to this. Her pack was heavy with the necessary supplies: rations, communication gear, and a rifle. The weight didn't bother her. In fact, it was a comforting reminder of the mission ahead. Observation Post 9 wasn't just a lookout. It was a critical part of the base's surveillance network. If anything moved within the vast expanse of the plateau, she would be the first to see it. The route to the post took Eliza through a rugged, snow-covered terrain. The landscape was hauntingly beautiful, the jagged mountains looming like ancient sentinels against the pale sky. But Eliza's focus was on the task at hand. Her mind stayed sharp, her senses tuned to the smallest details of her surroundings. The wind carried the faintest scent of smoke, but there was no sign of fire. The snow beneath her feet creaked with every step, and the occasional crack from a distant mountain ridge reminded her that even the land itself was alive, shifting and changing. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of trudging through the snow, Eliza reached the post. It was little more than a small outpost of metal and wood, designed to withstand the harshest elements of the Cadron Plateau. The walls were reinforced with a layer of ice, and the roof sagged under the weight of accumulated snow. Despite its humble appearance, the post offered one of the most strategic views in the region. Inside, the small room was sparsely furnished, with a single cot and a desk cluttered with surveillance equipment. A large, bulletproof window offered an unobstructed view of the valley below. It was a perfect spot for a sniper or for someone who simply needed to observe. Eliza set her pack down and quickly surveyed the area. It was eerily quiet, the stillness of the snow-covered landscape almost oppressive. She activated the communications panel on the desk, her fingers moving swiftly over the controls. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of real-time satellite feeds and motion detectors. She checked them carefully, her trained eye scanning the data for anything out of the ordinary. "Nothing yet," she muttered to herself, pulling her rifle from its case and setting it up by the window. She adjusted the scope, her fingers steady and practiced. The plateau stretched out before her like a vast, frozen wasteland. The mountain ridges loomed to the west, their peaks shrouded in mist. Below, the valley was dotted with sparse vegetation and the occasional wildlife, mostly small animals, birds, and the occasional pack of wolves. Eliza scanned the horizon once more, her eyes moving from left to right. Then, in the distance, she saw something. A small figure, barely discernible against the white snow. At first, it seemed like nothing, just another trick of the light, or perhaps a shadow cast by a distant mountain. But then the figure moved. Eliza's heart rate quickened. The movement was deliberate, almost too cautious. She zoomed in with a rifle scope, her breath steady as she focused. It was a figure wrapped in dark clothing, moving with purpose through the snow. No one should have been out here, not in this weather, and certainly not without proper clearance. Her mind raced. Was it a scout from the enemy base? Or perhaps someone lost, someone who didn't belong? She couldn't afford to take any chances. She grabbed the radio receiver, adjusting the frequency to the command center. Command, this is Shaw at observation post 9. I've spotted movement at coordinates 45 to 33. Could be an enemy operative, but I'm not sure yet. Requesting instructions. The radio crackled to life after a brief pause. Copy that, Shaw. Stay on the lookout. We'll send a team to investigate. Keep your eyes peeled. Eliza nodded, her gaze never leaving the figure in the distance. She was alone here, far from the rest of the base, but her instincts told her this wasn't just a routine check. The figure's movements were too deliberate, too calculated. Something was off. Hours passed. The figure continued to move through the snow, always keeping to the edge of the valley, never fully emerging into the open. Eliza tracked its every move, the tension building in her chest. She adjusted the focus of her scope, but the figure remained elusive, always just out of clear view. The radio remained silent, the static buzz in her ear a constant reminder of her isolation. She couldn't afford to relax. Every second felt like an eternity, the stillness of the post only amplifying the unease gnawing at her. Eliza had learned long ago that nothing in this job was ever as simple as it seemed. Finally, the figure made a decisive move. It ducked low behind a ridge, disappearing from sight. Eliza's heart skipped a beat. Was it trying to evade detection, or was it setting up for something more? Her finger hovered over the radio button, but she hesitated. The command center would send reinforcements, but they were hours away. She couldn't wait that long. If this was a threat, she had to act quickly. Eliza grabbed her pack, slipping her rifle into its case. She knew what she had to do. She pulled on her gloves and stepped out into the snow, the wind howling against her face. As the figure remained hidden, Eliza began her descent into the valley below. The air felt denser as Eliza moved cautiously down the slope, her boots crunching softly in the deep snow. The wind whipped at her face, but she ignored it, focused solely on the mission. The figure had disappeared behind the ridge, but she was certain they hadn't left the area. This wasn't just a simple scout. There was something far more deliberate about their movements, and Eliza had learned long ago to trust her instincts. She moved quickly, but quietly, each step measured and deliberate. The terrain was treacherous, the snow shifting beneath her weight, but she knew this land like the back of her hand. Every rock, every tree, every shadow was a potential hiding place. She couldn't afford to make sound. The figure hadn't reappeared yet, but Eliza could feel the tension growing, her muscles tight with anticipation. She reached the ridge where the figure had disappeared, crouching low to avoid detection. Peering around the corner, she scanned the area. There was no sign of movement, no trace of the figure. Only the endless white of the plateau stretched out before her, vast and empty. Her pulse quickened. Had they seen her? Was it a trap? She listened intently, straining for any sound. Footsteps, the rustling of snow, anything. The wind howled in her ears, but there was nothing else. The silence was unnerving. Eliza took a slow, careful step forward, moving to the edge of the ridge. Her eyes darted across the terrain, searching for any signs of life. And then she saw it, a faint trail of footprints, barely visible against the snow. The figure had been here, but they were moving fast, leaving only the slightest evidence of their passage. Without hesitation, Eliza followed the trail, her steps light but purposeful. She moved quickly, her heart pounding as she closed the distance. The trail led her through a narrow gap between two towering rock formations, the shadows deep and foreboding. The air felt colder here, the wind swirling between the jagged cliffs. It was a perfect hiding place, a natural ambush waiting to happen. As she rounded the corner, Eliza froze. There, ahead of her, was the figure. They were crouched low, their body blending into the rocky terrain, but Eliza could make out the dark silhouette against the white snow. The figure's posture was tense, their head slightly turned as if they were waiting for something or someone. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know whether to engage or pull back. She was alone, and the figure was too close now. If they were an enemy operative, there was no time for hesitation. But just as Eliza began to take a step forward, the figure moved. They didn't run, but they darted to the left, disappearing behind another rock formation. It was a calculated move, intended to bait her, to make her chase them. But Eliza wasn't a rookie. She knew how to handle a situation like this. Slowly, deliberately, Eliza crouched low and began to circle around the ridge, staying out of sight. Her mind was sharp, her training kicking in. She had learned the art of stealth, of patience. She would not be fooled. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. She moved silently, her eyes never leaving the area where the figure had disappeared. She was getting closer. She could feel it. The moment she spotted movement, she would take action. And then she saw it. A glimmer of light, just a flicker, through a narrow gap in the rocks. Eliza's heart leaped into her throat. The figure was making their move again, but this time, they were heading toward a small cave entrance in the mountainside. A perfect hideout. She knew she had to act fast. If they reached that cave, she might lose them for good. Without thinking, Eliza broke into a sprint, her boots pounding the snow beneath her. She was closing the distance quickly, the adrenaline rushing through her veins. She wasn't sure if the figure had heard her, but she didn't care. The cave was within reach, and she wouldn't let them escape. As she neared the entrance, the figure turned, their face half hidden in the shadows. Eliza didn't hesitate. She fired a warning shot into the air, the sound of the rifle echoing off the rocks. "Stop!" she commanded, her voice steady but firm. The figure froze, their body rigid with surprise. For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the wind howling through the narrow pass. Eliza tightened her grip on the rifle, her finger hovering over the trigger. She couldn't afford to take any chances. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the silence. "What are you doing here?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, they slowly raised their hands in a gesture of surrender, their movements cautious. "Turn around," Eliza ordered, her voice sharp. The figure complied, spinning around slowly to face her. Eliza's breath caught in her throat as she caught her first clear glimpse of the person standing before her. It was a woman, her face pale and worn, her eyes wide with fear. She was trembling, but not from the cold. Something else had her on edge. Eliza's mind raced. This wasn't what she had expected. This wasn't an enemy operative. She could see the desperation in the woman's eyes, the weight of something heavy pressing down on her. But what was it? What was this woman running from? Before Eliza could ask another question, the woman spoke, her voice shaking. "I'm not here to harm you," she said. I need your help." The words hung in the air, the weight of them settling between them. Eliza's grip on her rifle loosened slightly, but she didn't lower it. She wasn't about to trust this stranger, not yet. But something about her words, her plea, made Eliza hesitate. "What do you need help with?" Eliza asked, her voice cautious. The woman's eyes flickered to the cave entrance, and then back to Eliza. "You don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a storm coming, a storm like you've never seen. And it's not just the weather, it's something far worse. Something unnatural." Eliza's heart skipped a beat. Eliza's eyes narrowed as she processed the woman's words. "Unnatural?" she repeated, her voice steady but laced with suspicion. She was a seasoned operative. She didn't believe in fairy tales or ghost stories. But the woman's desperation was hard to ignore, and there was something unsettling in the way she spoke. The woman nodded, her face pale, the shadows under her eyes deepening with each passing second. "I know it sounds crazy," she continued, her voice trembling, "but you have to believe me. The storm, it's not just a weather phenomenon. There's something in it, something that hunts." Eliza's mind raced. This wasn't the kind of operation she was trained for. Her mission had been simple: scout the area, eliminate any threats, and return with intelligence. But now, she was faced with something far more disturbing. "I'm not a meteorologist," Eliza said dryly, glancing at the darkening sky. "But I know enough to recognize when a storm's brewing. And we need to move." The woman cut her off, her voice frantic. "No, you don't understand. The storm is already here. It's coming, and we're trapped. If we don't leave now." Before she could finish, A low rumble echoed through the mountainside, followed by a strange vibration beneath their feet. The ground trembled for a split second, enough to make Eliza's heart skip a beat. The weather had been eerily calm just moments ago. Now, it felt like everything was shifting. The woman's eyes widened in terror, and she grabbed Eliza's arm, her grip tight. "We have to go. They're coming. They're already here." Eliza pulled away sharply, her instinct to stay focused kicking in. "Who's coming?" she demanded, her tone sharp. "What's going on?" The woman shook her head, her lips trembling as she whispered, "The creatures. The ones from the storm. They hunt in the dark." Eliza's pulse quickened. "Creatures? What kind of creatures?" Before she could press further, a flash of movement in the distance caught her eye. A shadow darted across the horizon, swift and silent. Eliza stiffened, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. But when she glanced back at the woman, she saw nothing but fear in her eyes. "There," the woman whispered, her voice strained. "They're here." Eliza followed the woman's gaze, her senses on high alert. But all she could see was the wide expanse of snow-covered land stretching out before them. It looked peaceful, unassuming, but Eliza knew better than to trust appearances. Something was wrong. The air had changed. It felt charged, oppressive. The rumble returned, louder this time, as if the very earth was groaning under some unseen weight. Eliza's eyes flicked back to the woman, whose gaze was fixed on the ridge ahead. The woman was shaking now, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "They'll find us," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible. "They always find us." Eliza's grip on her rifle tightened. "Oh," she asked again, her voice low but firm. "Who will find us?" But the woman didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward the horizon, where the sky had darkened in a way that seemed unnatural, an eerie, almost unnatural shade of green that had no place in the natural world. Eliza's instincts kicked in. "Get down," she ordered, dropping to her knees and pulling the woman with her. The wind had started to pick up again, but there was something different about it. It wasn't just cold. It was harsh, biting, filled with a strange, unnatural energy that crackled in the air. The storm had come, but not in the way Eliza had expected. As the wind howled, Eliza tried to steady herself against the gusts. She could feel the hairs on her neck standing on end. The strange sensation of being watched crept over her. The woman beside her was trembling violently, her eyes wide with fear. "I told you," the woman whispered. "They're here. They'll come for us." Eliza's mind raced. She couldn't let her guard down, not now. The storm was far too unpredictable, and if this woman's warning held any truth, they were in grave danger. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled once again, this time more violently than before. Eliza barely had time to react before a screeching sound tore through the air, a sound so unnatural that it made her blood run cold. Her heart pounded as she scrambled to her feet, eyes scanning the landscape. And then she saw it. A figure, no, a shape, emerged from the snow-covered ridge ahead, its form dark and twisted, blending seamlessly with the storm. It moved with unnatural speed, its silhouette barely discernible against the darkening sky. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. A creature, no doubt, but not one of this world. Its body was grotesque, stretching and contorting in ways that made Eliza's stomach churn. And yet, it was moving directly toward them, its eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. Eliza reached for her weapon, her mind focused on survival. But as she raised it, she realized something that made her blood run cold. This creature wasn't alone. From the shadows, more figures emerged, their glowing eyes casting an eerie light across the landscape. One by one, they appeared, each one more terrifying than the last. There were at least a dozen of them, surrounding the two women, their movements jerky and erratic as they closed in. The storm intensified, the wind now howling like a wild beast. Eliza's mind raced as she calculated their options. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. These creatures, whatever they were, had them trapped. And then, in the midst of the chaos, Eliza's voice cut through the storm. Stay close, she commanded the woman, her tone sharp. We fight or we die. The woman nodded, her face pale with fear. But there was a glimmer of something else in her eyes now, determination. Eliza wasn't sure if she had any weapons, but it didn't matter. They would have to fight with whatever they had. As the first creature lunged toward them, Eliza took a deep breath and prepared for the battle ahead. The wind howled like a monstrous beast, its icy fingers clawing at Eliza's face as she aimed her rifle at the first creature charging toward them. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Its skin was mottled and stretched, covering a frame too thin, yet unnaturally strong. Its eyes, glowing an eerie red, locked onto Eliza as if it knew exactly who to target. Without hesitation, she pulled the trigger. The gunshot rang through the storm, the sound almost lost in the cacophony of wind and growls. The creature staggered back, a spray of dark fluid splashing onto the snow. But it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a guttural roar that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Eliza! The woman screamed, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Get back. They'll surround us. The words were barely out of her mouth when another creature lunged from the shadows, its teeth sharp and gleaming in the dim light. Eliza spun, raising her rifle again just in time to fire another shot. But the second creature dodged the bullet, moving with an unnatural speed. It was almost as if the storm itself was giving them strength, empowering them to be faster, stronger, deadlier. Eliza's pulse quickened as she realized they weren't just fighting creatures. They were fighting against something far more powerful. The storm wasn't just a backdrop. It was an active participant, shifting the balance between them and their enemies. The woman by her side scrambled for cover, her eyes wide with terror, but Eliza wasn't sure how much help she would be. She had to rely on herself now. These creatures had one goal: to hunt, to kill, and they weren't going to stop until their prey was consumed. Another creature appeared from the swirling snow, this one larger, more grotesque than the others. It had jagged limbs that seemed to crack and break as it moved, as though its body was built from parts of different animals. Its face was twisted, almost human, but with no discernible features, just a gaping mouth filled with rows of teeth that seemed to drip with something black and oily. Eliza! The woman shouted again, her voice quivering with panic. We can't hold them off forever. But Eliza's gaze was fixed on the new creature. It was coming toward them faster than she had anticipated. With a sharp inhale, she darted to the side, barely avoiding its snapping jaws. The creature's claws raked against the snow, sending up plumes of white powder as it tried to strike her down. Her mind raced, calculating her next move. She had limited ammunition, and the creatures seemed to be multiplying by the minute. This was no longer a fight she could win through brute force alone. She needed to think, and think fast. Just as the creature lunged again, Eliza rolled to her feet, aiming for its legs. She fired. The bullet hit its knee joint, and the creature howled, its massive body crashing to the ground. But even as it fell, Eliza could see it beginning to get back up, its limbs twitching unnaturally as if it were being reassembled from the inside. This wasn't just a battle against creatures. It was a fight against something that defied nature. Eliza, please. The woman's voice was panicked now, nearly hysterical. We have to leave. We can't survive this. Eliza glanced back toward her, but she knew there was no time to retreat. The storm had trapped them here. The creatures were relentless, and they were getting stronger with every second they fought. The wind howled again, louder now, almost deafening. Eliza could feel the temperature dropping even further, the cold seeping through her clothing and freezing her bones. And yet, the storm wasn't just cold, it was alive. There was an energy to it, an unnatural force that seemed to be feeding the creatures and heightening their power. Then, out of the corner of her eye, Eliza saw something that made her blood run cold. From the edge of the storm, a massive shadow loomed, towering over the smaller creatures. It was difficult to make out at first, just a flicker of movement, but then it stepped forward. A massive, hulking figure, its body covered in armor-like scales that gleamed black against the greenish light of the storm. Its head was enormous, with eyes that shone a sickly yellow. The creature was different. It wasn't like the others. It was smarter. It had a presence. And Eliza could feel the shift in the air as it approached. "Eliza, move!" the woman screamed, dragging her toward the only shelter they could find, a rock outcrop to their left. But Eliza stood frozen. Her instinct screamed at her to fight, but part of her knew they had no chance against this thing. Not in this storm. The giant creature's eyes locked onto her, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow. The storm, the chaos, the howling wind, it all faded into the background. Eliza could hear nothing but the pounding of her own heart. Then, with a horrifying roar, the giant creature charged, its massive limbs propelling it toward them with terrifying speed. Eliza barely had time to react. She dove to the side, just as the creature's claws slashed through the air where she had been standing only moments before. The woman screamed again, but Eliza was already on her feet, rolling toward the rock outcrop for cover. The storm raged harder, the winds now carrying the sounds of the creatures as they closed in on them. "We can't outrun them," Eliza muttered to herself, her mind racing. "We need a plan." The woman collapsed beside her, her face pale and drawn. "What are we supposed to do?" she whispered. "We're going to die here. We can't fight them all." But Eliza didn't respond. She was too focused on the creature. It was drawing closer now, its breath ragged, and its eyes locked onto her like a predator eyeing its prey. There was no way out, no way to escape, not unless they made a stand. Eliza looked at the woman, her expression hardening. "We fight or we die." The ground beneath them trembled as the giant creature moved closer. Its massive form was almost too monstrous to comprehend, but Eliza's focus didn't waver. She had only one goal now: survive. "Do you have any more ammo?" she asked the woman, her voice cold and commanding. The woman, her face pale and trembling, shook her head. "No, I used everything. I thought we were—" Before she could finish, a roar echoed through the storm, interrupting her. The giant creature was nearly upon them, its yellow eyes glowing brighter with each step. It was a mere 10 meters away now, each of its footfalls sending tremors through the snow. Eliza's mind raced. She had no more bullets, no backup plan. She only had one thing left: her wits. The storm was her only ally now, and she had to use it to her advantage. "Eliza," the woman's voice quivered. "We have to get out of here now." But Eliza didn't move. Instead, she watched the storm, her senses sharpened as she noted the wind's pattern, the way it whipped through the trees, and how the temperature seemed to fluctuate in sync with the giant creature's approach. Then it hit her. "The storm, it's connected to them," she muttered under her breath. "It's feeding them power." The woman, still confused and panicked, glanced at her. "What are you talking about?" Eliza turned toward her, eyes flashing with determination. "The storm's not just a weather event. It's a conduit. If we can use it against them, if we could disrupt the energy, it could weaken them. We might just have a chance." Her words were barely out of her mouth before the giant creature charged again. Eliza acted without hesitation. She grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her behind the nearest rock outcrop, just as the massive creature lunged toward them. The shockwave from its strike sent snow flying into the air. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't have time to be afraid. She needed to act. The storm, fierce and unrelenting, continued to howl above them. Eliza could feel it now, the energy in the air, thick and oppressive. The creature was feeding off the storm, using it as fuel to gain power. If she could disrupt that connection— "Eliza!" The woman cried out again, her voice full of desperation. "What do we do?" "Follow me," Eliza commanded, her tone resolute. "I need you to help me create a diversion." The woman looked at her in disbelief. A diversion? Against that thing? But Eliza didn't wait for a response. She grabbed a nearby rock and began to drag it toward a small, broken-down structure, half buried in the snow. "I need you to distract it," Eliza said quickly, her voice tight with urgency. "Get its attention. Use the storm. I'll be right behind you." Before the woman could protest, Eliza was gone, moving with quiet precision toward the structure. She had a plan, an untested one, but it was the only chance they had. The woman hesitated for a moment, staring at the charging creature. Then, with a deep breath, she nodded. She picked up a large piece of debris and hurled it toward the creature, shouting to grab its attention. The creature immediately stopped and turned toward her, its glowing yellow eyes narrowing as it locked onto its new target. "Now!" Eliza shouted, her voice cutting through the storm. The woman sprinted toward the structure, using the wind and the debris to cover her movements. Meanwhile, Eliza was already at the base of the ruined building, her hands moving quickly as she set up a crude trap. It wasn't much, a makeshift trigger mechanism made from rocks and the wires she'd scavenged from the wreckage, but it might just work. The storm, its wild and unpredictable nature, could be their salvation. Behind her, the giant creature was closing in again, roaring in frustration as it tried to track the woman's movements. The wind picked up, howling like a beast in the distance, but Eliza didn't let it distract her. She worked faster, her heart pounding in her chest, adrenaline flooding her veins. As she finished setting the final piece in place, she glanced over her shoulder. The woman had nearly reached the structure, her footsteps faltering in the snow. The giant creature was close, too close. "Eliza," she screamed. "It's coming for me. Don't stop. Keep moving." Eliza shouted back. The woman scrambled up the side of the structure, just as the creature's massive foot slammed into the ground, shaking the very earth beneath them. "Now!" Eliza screamed, pulling the trigger on her makeshift device. A loud crack echoed through the storm, followed by a series of explosions. The ground trembled, and a cascade of snow and debris fell from the sky, blocking the creature's path. It stumbled, momentarily disoriented, just as Eliza dashed forward, her eyes locked on the creature's glowing eyes. The wind howled, swirling around them with unnatural force, but Eliza felt a surge of hope. The storm was shifting. The creature had lost its connection to the storm's energy. "Eliza!" The woman cried out again, fear still thick in her voice. Eliza turned to see the woman standing on the crumbling structure, watching her with wide eyes. "We can't stay here," Eliza said, breathless. "The storm is changing. We need to move before it gets worse." The ground beneath them shook again, and Eliza knew this was only the beginning. With one final look at the creature, Eliza motioned for the woman to follow her. They were not safe yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time since the storm had begun, Eliza felt a glimmer of hope. They could survive. They just had to outlast the storm, and they would fight until the very end. The wind howled with increasing intensity as Eliza and the woman navigated the treacherous terrain, scrambling over rocks and broken debris. The creature, disoriented from the explosion, had retreated for a moment, but Eliza knew it wouldn't be long before it regrouped. The storm was worsening, and so was the creature's power. "How much further?" the woman gasped, her breath coming in sharp bursts. "Just a little more," Eliza replied, not breaking her pace. Her eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of a safe haven. But all she could see was the endless expanse of snow, the swirling storm, and the looming threat of the creature still stalking them. They were running out of time. The storm was changing, growing stronger, and Eliza felt a deep unease in her chest. The balance of the environment was shifting, and with it, the creatures seemed to grow more powerful, more dangerous. "Stay close," Eliza ordered, her voice steady despite the growing panic inside her. "The storm is affecting everything. It's amplifying the creature's power. If we don't get to the shelter before it's too late, we're done for." The woman nodded, her face pale, her body shaking not just from the cold but from fear. They had come so far, but they both knew that the hardest part was still ahead. They had to reach the shelter, a place Eliza had heard about during their journey, an old research facility buried deep in the mountain range, abandoned after the first wave of attacks. It was their only hope now. But as they moved, the ground beneath them rumbled again, and a chilling roar echoed from behind them. The creature was back. Eliza's heart skipped a beat. They couldn't outrun it. There was no time left. "Keep moving," she shouted, pushing the woman forward. "We need to get inside now." But as they rounded the corner of a cliffside, Eliza's heart sank. There, half buried in the snow, was the entrance to the shelter. It was blocked. The heavy doors, once sturdy and fortified, were now sealed shut by a massive pile of snow and debris, a result of the earlier explosion. "No!" Eliza cursed under her breath. "We're trapped." The woman looked at the blocked entrance, panic rising in her eyes. "What now? What do we do?" Eliza didn't answer right away. Her mind was racing. She could hear the creature's footsteps growing louder, and the howling wind made it impossible to think clearly. She had one last card to play. She hoped it was enough. "Help me clear the snow," Eliza said firmly, grabbing a nearby metal rod. "We're not giving up yet." Together, they dug through the snow with frantic urgency, throwing chunks of ice and debris aside as quickly as they could. But the storm made it nearly impossible to make any progress. The winds picked up, sending the snow back into their faces, blurring their vision. Then, through the haze of the storm, Eliza spotted something. A crack in the ice where the shelter's door had once been. It was small, but it was there. They could make it. "We can crawl through," she shouted, her voice tinged with desperation. "Get to the other side." With renewed determination, the woman pushed forward, clearing the final few inches of snow until the entrance was open enough for them to squeeze through. The creature was almost upon them, its monstrous roar cutting through the storm like a blade. Just as the woman pulled herself through the opening, Eliza felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. The creature was so close now, the air thick with its fury. She didn't have much time. Eliza grabbed the woman's arm, yanking her inside, just as the door slammed shut behind them. The cold, biting winds of the storm were replaced by the eerie stillness of the shelter's interior. Breathing heavily, they stood in the darkness for a moment, listening to the howls of the creature outside, its growls reverberating through the walls. "Are we safe?" the woman asked, her voice quivering with exhaustion. Eliza didn't answer at first. She was scanning the room, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The shelter was cold, but it was intact. It wasn't much, but it was shelter, at least for now. "I don't know," Eliza said finally, her voice low. "We need to prepare. The storm isn't over, and neither is the creature." They both fell silent, the reality of their situation settling in. The creature wasn't just a physical threat. It was a force of nature connected to the storm in a way that neither of them fully understood. If they didn't find a way to sever that connection, they would be trapped in this endless cycle of survival. Eliza turned toward the woman, her expression hardening with resolve. "We're not just surviving. We're going to stop this. We're going to find out what's causing this and end it. Whatever it takes." The woman nodded, her eyes wide but filled with a glimmer of hope. "Ow! I don't know yet," Eliza admitted, her voice steady. "But I have an idea. We'll figure it out. Together." The wind howled outside, and the creature's growls continued to echo in the distance. But inside the shelter, for the first time since the storm began, there was a quiet sense of resolve. They weren't just hiding from the storm anymore. They were fighting back, and they would not stop until they had won. The cold, sterile air of the shelter wrapped around Eliza as she examined her surroundings. The flickering lights cast long shadows across the room, and the stillness was almost suffocating. She had to act quickly. The storm outside was only getting worse, and she knew the creature would be back. It always came back. The woman, still shaken but determined, stood beside her, her eyes scanning the room nervously. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Eliza didn't respond immediately. Instead, she moved toward a set of old, dusty computers at the far end of the room. The equipment was old, its wires tangled and its screens cracked, but Eliza had seen enough to know that this was the facility where it all started. The place where the storm, the creature, and everything in between had been set in motion. "We need to figure out what happened here," Eliza said, her voice resolute. "If we can find the data, we might be able to stop it." She pulled open a drawer, searching through old documents, but found nothing that seemed relevant. The storm outside grew louder, its fury almost tangible. The ground trembled as if the creature was calling to them, reminding them of its presence. "We need to find something more," Eliza muttered to herself. "There has to be something in this room that can help us." The woman moved to the other side of the shelter, her eyes tracing the walls, looking for anything that could provide a clue. Then suddenly she stopped, her gaze fixed on a series of old maps pinned to the wall. Eliza joined her, noticing the intricate markings and notations on the maps. The lines were drawn in a way that made no sense at first, but as Eliza looked closer, a pattern began to emerge. The maps seemed to trace a path, a trail of energy, as if the storm's power had been harnessed and redirected. "What is this?" Eliza asked, pointing to a set of coordinates marked on the map. "Is this where the creature came from?" The woman nodded slowly, her face pale. "These markings are part of the research that was done here." The creature wasn't the only thing they were studying. They were experimenting with the storm's energy. But something went wrong. Eliza's heart skipped a beat. "The storm's energy? What do you mean?" "These," the woman explained, tracing her finger along the map, "are the locations where the energy was being collected. But there was one experiment they were working on, a device designed to control the energy. It's possible the creature is a result of that device malfunctioning." Eliza's mind raced. If the creature was tied to the storm's energy, then perhaps they could sever that connection. But how? And where was the device? "Where is it?" Eliza asked urgently. The woman hesitated for a moment, then pointed toward the far corner of the shelter. "There's a hidden lab beneath the facility. It's where the most classified experiments were conducted. If the device is still functioning, it's there." Eliza didn't waste another second. She grabbed her gear, motioning for the woman to follow. The storm outside was relentless, but inside the shelter, they had to take the risk. They had to find the source of the creature, or they would never survive the storm. The woman followed closely behind as Eliza led her to a set of stairs, descending into the lower levels of the shelter. The air grew colder as they descended, the silence oppressive. Eliza's mind raced with questions. If they found the device, would they be able to destroy it? Or would they make things worse? At the bottom of the stairs, they found a heavy metal door, sealed tightly with a series of complex locks. Eliza's fingers trembled as she worked quickly to bypass the security system, each passing second feeling like an eternity. With a soft click, the door opened. Inside, the lab was dark and abandoned. Old machinery and monitors lined the walls, covered in layers of dust. But at the center of the room, a single device stood, an enormous machine, its design unlike anything Eliza had ever seen. It hummed with energy, the faint glow from its core pulsating like a heartbeat. The creature had to be connected to this machine. Eliza could feel it in her bones. "How do we stop it?" the woman whispered, her voice trembling. Eliza didn't have an answer yet. She approached the device cautiously, her hand reaching for the console. The machine's interface was ancient, covered in unfamiliar symbols and codes. But as she studied it, she realized there was a pattern, a way to disable it. "Stay close," Eliza said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "I think I can shut it down." The woman nodded, stepping back as Eliza began working the console. Her fingers flew over the controls, activating a sequence of commands. The machine responded with a low, eerie hum, and for a moment, it felt like the world held its breath. Then, suddenly, the machine flared to life. Sparks flew from its core, and a violent tremor shook the room. Eliza stumbled back, fear flooding her chest. "We need to move," Eliza shouted, grabbing the woman's arm and pulling her toward the exit. The machine was destabilizing, its energy surging uncontrollably. They raced toward the door, but the sound of the creature's roar echoed through the facility, growing louder by the second. The creature wasn't just after them. It was coming for the machine. And if they didn't stop it, everything they had fought for would be destroyed. Eliza and the woman ran, their hearts pounding in their chests, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. The storm outside seemed to intensify with each passing second, its fury mirroring the chaos inside the shelter. Eliza's pulse raced as she led the woman down the narrow corridor, their footsteps echoing in the silence that followed the explosion from the machine. They had narrowly escaped the lab, but the creature was still out there, and the threat it posed was more imminent than ever. "Where do we go now?" the woman gasped, her breath shallow from the sprint. Eliza didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the darkened hallway. The flickering lights overhead cast eerie shadows, and the sense of impending danger weighed heavily on them both. "We need to get to the central control room," Eliza said, her voice tense. "If we can get the security systems back online, we might have a chance to trap the creature." The woman nodded, her face pale but determined. "Lead the way." They moved swiftly, the sound of their footsteps becoming louder in the stillness. Every so often, a distant crash or a low growl echoed through the shelter, sending a chill down their spines. The creature was hunting them. It knew they were close, and it would stop at nothing to finish what had started. As they reached the control room, Eliza quickly input the access codes she had memorized. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a small, dimly lit room filled with rows of monitors and blinking consoles. The air was thick with the smell of dust and old machinery, but Eliza's focus remained sharp. "Here," she said, moving to a central terminal. "If I can get the power back, we can lock down the facility and trap the creature inside." The woman stood by the door, keeping a lookout. "Hurry," she urged, her voice trembling. Eliza's fingers flew over the console, her mind working through the complex series of commands required to restore the power. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she pushed through the tension, knowing that every second counted. The hum of the machinery grew louder as the power grid flickered back to life. The monitors lit up, casting an eerie glow across the room. One by one, the security systems began to come online. But then, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, followed by the unmistakable sound of the creature's growl. It was close. Too close. "We don't have much time," Eliza shouted, her heart pounding in her chest. She continued typing, her hands shaking but determined. The woman rushed to her side, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do now?" Eliza glanced at the terminal screen, her mind racing. "I need to lock the main doors, trap it in the containment zone." With one last desperate move, Eliza activated the security lockdown. The doors to the central hall slammed shut with a deafening noise, and the lights in the corridor flickered. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the creature roared. It was inside. The floor beneath them rumbled as the creature's massive form collided with the containment walls, its fury evident in every deafening thud. Eliza's hands clenched into fists as she watched the monitors, knowing that they had only one chance to stop it. "We need to destroy it," Eliza said, her voice cold with resolve. "It's the only way." The woman stared at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "How? How do we destroy it?" Eliza turned to the woman, her expression grim. "The storm's energy, it's tied to the creature. If we overload the containment system, we can send a shock wave that will destabilize it. But it will be risky. We need to make sure the creature is in the center of the containment field." The woman nodded, understanding the danger. "I'll help you." Together, they ran to the far side of the room, where the central control panel stood. The creature's growls grew louder, its rage escalating as it slammed against the walls. Eliza's fingers moved quickly over the panel, her heart racing. "Get ready," she said, her voice tight. "When I trigger the overload, we need to get out of here fast." The woman glanced nervously at the monitors, watching as the creature's shape moved closer, its massive form filling the screen. "What if it doesn't work?" "It has to work," Eliza said, her voice barely a whisper. With one final push, Eliza pressed the button. The entire facility seemed to shake as a surge of energy coursed through the containment system, sending a powerful shockwave reverberating through the walls. For a moment, everything went still. Then, the creature screamed. It was an ear-splitting, primal cry that seemed to echo through every inch of the shelter. The lights flickered as the shockwave pulsed, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The air was thick with the smell of ozone as Eliza and the woman turned to run. But as they reached the door, The creature lunged, its claws scraping against the metal. Eliza's heart raced as she slammed the door shut behind them, the sound of the creature's fury still ringing in their ears. For a moment, they stood in silence, listening to the distant growl of the creature. But it was weaker now, its power diminishing with each passing second. "We did it," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. Eliza nodded, her breath coming in short gasps. "We stopped it." But as they turned to leave, Eliza knew that the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The shelter's walls groaned as if in protest, the deep hum of the dying creature echoing in every corner of the now quiet hallways. Eliza stood frozen, her hands gripping the control panel as the faint tremors from the creature's last attempts to escape reverberated underfoot. But the air was different now. It was still heavy with the remnants of tension and adrenaline, but there was also something else, a sense of finality. The creature's struggle was over. The storm had calmed, and all that remained was the aftermath. "We need to leave," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eliza turned, her gaze sweeping over the control room one last time. The monitors were dark, their screens now lifeless. The storm outside had abated, but the damage had been done. The experiment was over. The creature was gone. And yet, something nagged at the back of Eliza's mind, a feeling that it was too easy, too quiet. She could hear the woman's footsteps approaching her. "Are you okay?" Eliza nodded, but her expression was distant. "We have to make sure the creature is truly gone. The power grid, the containment, we need to be sure." The woman stepped closer, concern written across her face. "What do you mean?" Eliza's mind raced as she recalled the creature's unnatural resistance to every attempt they had made to contain it. There is something about its origins, the lab, the experiments, the fusion of technology and biology that still didn't sit right with her. "I think there's still a chance it's not over," Eliza said, her voice low and uncertain. "It's too dangerous to leave now." The woman took a step back, her eyes widening with fear. "So what do we do?" Eliza exhaled slowly, shaking her head as she tried to quell the rising dread. "We need to check the containment room again. The overload should have worked, but we can't be sure." They moved quickly, stepping into the hallway, the silence now oppressive around them. The soft hum of emergency lights flickered above them as they made their way toward the central containment area. Each step felt heavier than the last. The darkened corridors seemed to stretch endlessly before them, and the air seemed to grow colder as they drew closer to the heart of the shelter. When they arrived, Eliza carefully approached the control panel. The screen before her displayed a flickering image of the containment room. It was empty, her breath caught in her throat. "It's gone," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. But Eliza wasn't convinced. She didn't trust it. The creature was far too powerful, far too intelligent to have simply vanished. Her fingers flew across the keys, trying to reinitiate the system check. And then it happened. The display shifted, showing a new reading. The containment walls, though damaged, were still standing strong. But the creature's energy levels were fluctuating. It wasn't dead. Not yet. "It's not over," Eliza murmured, her heart racing again. "It's still alive." The woman looked at her, horror settling on her features. "What do we do now?" Eliza didn't hesitate. She had no other option but to finish what they started. "We have to destroy it once and for all." The woman nodded, her face pale but resolute. "What do we need to do?" Eliza's mind worked quickly, formulating a last-ditch plan. "We'll overload the central reactor. It should send a final shockwave through the entire shelter. It'll destroy everything, including the creature. There's no time to waste." The woman swallowed hard, but there was no turning back now. "Let's do it." They raced through the shelter once more, heading toward the central reactor. The ground still shook from the remnants of the creature's energy, and Eliza could feel the weight of what they were about to do. Every step felt like a ticking clock. They didn't have long before the creature regained its strength. When they reached the reactor room, Eliza moved quickly to the control panel, bypassing the damaged security systems. "We'll need to redirect all power into the central core. The reactor should act as a conduit, and unleash a final blast that will obliterate everything. The woman stepped up beside her, anxiety clear in her eyes. Is there no other way? Eliza shook her head, her gaze locked on the blinking screens. This is the only way to ensure the creature is truly gone. With one final command, Eliza activated the sequence. The room around them rumbled as the reactor powered up. The air grew thick with tension as the countdown began. Eliza's breath was shallow, her hand on the lever that would trigger the final destruction. Is it over? The woman asked quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. Eliza didn't answer. Instead, she stared at the screens, watching the power levels surge, feeling the heartbeat of a shelter as it approached the moment of reckoning. And then, with a deafening roar that shook the walls, the reactor released its surge. A brilliant flash of light filled the room, followed by an immense shockwave that rippled through the shelter. The monitors flickered once more, then went dark. The ground shook violently as everything around them seemed to collapse in on itself. Eliza's eyes were closed, her body pressed against the console. The blast was overwhelming, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. When she opened her eyes, the destruction was complete. The creature was gone. The shelter was in ruins, but the silence that followed was different. It was peaceful. The woman stood beside her, her face streaked with sweat and dirt, but there was a look of relief in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Eliza nodded, her expression tired but resolute. "It's finally over." But even as she said the words, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something deeper had shifted. The world they knew was gone, and the storm they had weathered had left scars that would never fade. In the end, they had destroyed the creature, but the price was higher than either of them had ever imagined. As Eliza turned away, a single thought crossed her mind. What now?